I can't believe I'm showing you all this absolute mess. It's a little vulnerable for me looking at this from a couple weeks ago before I had some time to clean it up. This is a very typical thing that happens at the end of a homeschooling semester or a time where I'm not really able to get down in my art space to create, and yet things collect there and collect there and collect there. And I do things like the Gluebook Parties, and I kind of open up some space on the table so I can work a little bit, but with no full time hours to spend cleaning up and really organizing. And I haven't done this probably for a year. It just became an absolute mess. So this is what I was looking at a couple of weeks ago before I went to art lockdown. And now here is the final product after I cleaned. I will now take you on a tour of my organized, cleaned, and purged art space. So you just saw the absolute mess it was before, and actually it looks still very, very full. However, it is completely organized, and I even went through everything, even every bit of scrapbook paper, because it was just a disaster over there. All right, so let me take you on a little tour of my art space. And what I've got over here is storage space for my canvases and larger watercolor sheets. This whole area is packing supplies. There's one big canvas over here that I got because I was going to take a risk and do something huge, and I have not used it yet. Over here are some specialty papers that my husband got for me from Italy a couple years ago. I've used little bits of them. I have not used them completely. So that's what's over in this section. This is just a bin that is waiting for me to fill it to go to art lockdown next week. I go with my friend Heather every year, and it's just a fantastic weekend. So if I come over here, I can show you what we have. All right, so I decided to move what was in this space right here and put my paints there. I have a lot of paints. Let's see, I think they're mostly Liquitex. Yes, they're Liquitex. I got a big pack of like, I don't know, 36 colors of these little ones, and then I have some of the bigger ones that I use. Oh, that's a Blick. So anyway, that's all my acrylic paints. And below that, I have this little hanging basket that might have been from IKEA, and that actually holds my kids' art journals and some cardstock. Over here is a whole bunch of paper and pads, including tracing paper, watercolor paper, mixed media paper, etc. And then I've got, this is just random papers, including maps and sandpaper and things like that I would use. All right, so this little area right here, that's gonna hold my stuff for my planner. I got a new Midori style traveler's notebook, which I'm really excited about. And I love using moleskins, so it's a wide one to use moleskins in. All right, so down here, I've got pens over here that are not actually, I don't use those very often. Underneath that is my tube watercolors. I don't use those very often either, but they're there. Then I've got stuff I use more frequently. I've got stencils, and here are some glassine envelopes and other kind of things like index cards that I might use in my either creating or to hold things to sell, or like when I do my Gluebook parties, and sometimes if I sell a Gluebook or I give away a Gluebook kit, I'll put little scraps in there. These are some of my magazines. Now, a lot of the ones on the bottom are actually vintage, and I can go through some of the things I have at some other time with a different video, but that's what those are on the bottom. And then we've got, let's see, these are some random things. I don't use these as often. Here are some Sharpies on the right side, and then these are some little stencils that I made out of playing cards, which are fun. I have a video up on that, actually, if you'd like to see it. And then, moving over, now I'm going to have to sit down. Here's my space. I actually have two little stools here, and then this is my table. Oh, look at it. I love the mess on the table. I love that. Look at that gorgeous color. It's just one of my favorite things about over here. Okay, so I'm going back down. over here so you can see. This is my collection of vintage and old books. Now, I get books from a lot of different places and I won't pay more than $1 or $2 for them. So most of these have come from antique stores. They're anything from anime books to old dictionaries. These are some kind of kid pamphlets or old, I don't even know, almanacs, things like that. And then back here, I've got a lot of little textbooks and a lot of kid books, just vintage kid books that I use. This is another big stack. And then over here are some of the more image-based ones. I've got everything from workbooks, kid workbooks, to books in other languages. Then the things that are very image-based, like this one is an architecture book, another architecture book. I've got textile books, just things that give me images to use in collage. Then above that, there are a few more books in that corner over there. If you can see on that area, but they just couldn't fit on the bottom. Now here's my collage stash. I do have some more, but this is the bulk of it. So I've got things that are bigger on the bottom. I use these kind of Rubbermaid bins or Sterilite bins, and they're very helpful. The smaller ones I usually take with me. My washi collection here, which you can see, I really need to go through this because it doesn't fit in this anymore. Behind that is my collection of dictionaries. So I have an old one here, a couple of vintage ones, and then some that are newer. But I use those to find words. I use them for background pages a lot. All right, so we're moving up from this area, and here is where things get really yummy. Okay, so here are my collection of spray inks, which I actually don't use spray inks all that often, but I do use them with stencils sometimes. And then I've got alcohol inks up here, India inks, and then these are acrylic inks. Now I have been using acrylic inks a lot more lately. I really love them. One of the things I've been doing is actually sketching with the dropper on this black one. And it's just been very, very fun. I love the way it looks. So then I've got all my different media. I've got gesso, I've got gel medium, crackle paste, all those kind of things. And here's my collection of craft paints. Now I don't use the craft paints really. I keep them there for my kids. My kids can use them. And then I have a number of the big tubes from Liquitex. So that's what's in this shelf right here. Okay, then we're gonna move up. And up here, I've got my collection of art books, art magazines, like the thicker art journaling type magazines, and there's just a ton. You can also see my little flip camera. I do use that sometimes. This time I'm using my phone for this. All right, there's my Instax camera, and then some other random things, and some little art pieces that friends or family gave me and made. See that? Okay, so I just took you over in this section and showed you all the shelves, and now I've come back out so you can see a little more of what's on my desk and then what's in this big bin right here, this drawer unit. That's an IKEA drawer unit, and like I said before, we homeschool, and we used to do more preschool and young elementary stuff. We don't do as much of that anymore, so this used to hold all our homeschool stuff. It no longer does, so I claimed it. All right, so on my art table that I have here all the time, well, there's coffee and there's chocolate. Those are two things that are always there. This is my collection of watercolor crayons. I use those very often. They're like one of my favorite things to use. And then I've got over here more stuff for planning. I haven't really started using it yet, but you can see it's just some stickers and paper clips and things like that. I have a lot of stamps in this drawer unit over here, but these are the ones I use most often. So I have a couple alphabets and then some other things I use with ink pads. All right, so my cork collection, which a lot of these are actually stamps. They've been made into stamps. Now I did do a video on making these, and I had to edit it twice and it still didn't load right. So I'm gonna have to make another one, but they're very easy to make. And if you're a wine drinker, it's a great way to repurpose your corks. So then a candle and my incense. I use that every time I create. Okay, so then I've got a collection of sketching pens. I've got Sharpies, These are my most often used smaller paintbrushes, and coffee stirrers, which I use sometimes to sketch with ink or to move ink around on the page, like the acrylic inks I talked about. Scissors, just a bunch of different types, and they're not so great. I really need a really good sharp pair of craft scissors. I don't really have one. These are all not, they're kind of old and crummy. All right, so over here, this is just kind of just a random assortment of things. Ruler, craft knives, a couple bigger pens, Sharpies that didn't fit in the other one, palette knives, things of that nature. I also have a few pencils. These are aquarellable pencils, so they do respond to water. And yeah, there's one bigger paintbrush in here. Foam brushes, and these are my bigger paintbrushes. You can see that some of these are the long-handled ones. I don't really have a preference. I guess I would probably say I use the shorter ones the most often, but I really don't care. It's just some of the time, depending on price, I have used the longer ones. Okay, so that's what's on my table at all times. Now, over here, I'll just show you this table first. Under this table, I didn't really do much organizing. This is actually a bunch of stuff that my kids can use, so it's extra scrapbook paper and magazines, things like that. These two things back here are wallpaper or fabric swatches and books that my mom got me. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that's really awesome, and I have not used all that much of it, but I've used some of it. And then there's some big mat board things over here. So this is my collection of journals. I have a lot of art journals. Some of them have not really been used. A lot of them are partially full. A couple of them are mostly full. And then in the back are some art pieces that I probably should store a little better, but I haven't. All right, so going along to here. So in my drawer unit, this is all textural things and tape. So there's some duct tape, there's packing tape, but as you can see, there are things to use with paints to get more texture. So sandpaper, bubble wrap, things to use for stamps and stencils. My next bin, you'll notice I use a lot of repurposed stuff. So even these things up here, I mean, this came from, that was repurposed. These were repurposed, a lot of that stuff. So I try to do as much repurposing as I can. Okay, so these are a lot of stencils and ways to get shapes, obviously, tracing circles, a couple punches. I don't have all that many, a bunch of glue sticks in the back, and there is some ribbon. I don't use ribbon all that often, but this is what's in here. Some things are used a lot, some things are not. Now here is my drawing media drawer. So I've got ink pens, I've got pastels, I've got oil pastels, and my watercolor, my really nice Prismacolor pencils, and there's some sketching pencils toward the back, as you can see. I do also have, I don't use markers all that often, much to my husband's chagrin, because he bought me this really nice Copic set, and I just haven't used it all that much. That was a couple years ago. All right, so here's where I start getting into some of my stamps. I did a lot of scrapbooking a while back when my kids were really young, and I kind of didn't keep up, and I kind of lost interest in the scrapbooking part, but I still have a lot of my Stampin' Up! Supplies that I used. I do have some other ones that I don't use anymore. Maybe I should sell those on my Etsy shop or something, because they're really nice sets. They're not my style. So this is where I have a lot of my stamps, as you can see. Stamp pads back here, and some just random other things. There's buttons and a washcloth just to blot. All right, so then here is more of my collection of loose stamps. So there are a lot of different kinds here, and that's where I keep those. This is all my tissue paper. It is full of tissue paper. I love tissue paper. I use it very often. In here, I've got some other random things that don't get as much use. And this is I always forget what you call these things. This is the whole set. I did use it quite a bit when I was making cards and making scrapbook pages. And then down here are just a collection of yogurt cups, little plates. I actually use these for palettes when I have a few paints to use, cups, cold water, all that kind of stuff. All right, so that is it. It looks so much neater now. Oh, I feel a lot better. All right, hope you've enjoyed.